Shar, the Lady of Loss, the Mistress of the Night, the Night Singer, the Dark Lady. These are just a few of the names that she goes by. After Lord Ao created Realm Space, the crystal sphere that the planet Toril resides in, there was nothing in it except raw protoplasmic energy and the 13 Lords of Shadow, the Shadavari. It was chaos and timeless nothingness, a place of dim, misty shadows, as light and dark had not yet been separated. Eventually, this essence coalesced into twin beautiful goddesses who were yin and yang to each other. They were so close they thought of themselves as one being, the two-faced goddess. They created the heavenly bodies of realm space and infused them with life, creating the Earth Mother, Shantia. This new universe was lit by the silver-haired goddess Selûne and darkened by the welcoming tresses of the raven-haired goddess Shar. Shantia begged for warmth so that she could nurture life on the planets that were her limbs. And for the first time ever, the twin goddesses disagreed. Selûne wanted to oblige, but Shar opposed and wanted to keep the realm dark and lifeless. This caused a battle between the two, and from the deific residues of this conflict were birthed the gods of war, disease, murder, and death, among others. During the battle, Selûne gained an advantage and reached into a realm of eternal fire. Fighting the pain as it burned her, she grabbed a piece of this fire and used it to light one of the celestial bodies so that it burned in the sky and warmed Shantia. Shar was enraged and attacked even harder against her injured sister. Desperate, Selûne ripped off a piece of her divine essence and threw it at Shar. This newborn being of raw magic tore through Shar, bonding to some of her divine energy and ripping it free of her, reforming behind her as the goddess of magic Mistral. Mistral sided with Selûne and they defeated Shar. Ever since, Shar has sworn eternal revenge. They continued to fight for eons, and Shar's plot to reform the world after her own desires was aided by the Shadavari, who preferred night to blinding light and who stalked the realms, seeking to meld light and dark into shadow chaos once again. These Shadow Lords were imprisoned in a pocket-sized crystal sphere by a Zuth, using a shadow key forged by Gond, called the Shadow Star, that was thrown into the eternal cosmos. Now, Shar strives alone to rid realm space of life and warmth. Shar's portfolio consists of dark, night, loss, forgetfulness, and unrevealed secrets. In 2nd edition, she killed the god Imbrindal and subsumed his power, gaining the portfolios of Caverns, Dungeons, and the Underdark. Loss is the nature of Shar. She rules over pains hidden but not forgotten, bitterness nurtured away from the light and from others, and quiet revenge for any slight. Any dark thought that you have in your mind but you don't let anybody know about, that's Shar's domain. And she wants you to nurture those thoughts and eventually indulge in them, using darkness to conceal your hideous actions. To quote the warlock Farida, Dal told me once you worship Shar when grief overtakes you. You give her a little honor so that she eases the sadness through your life. That the evil of Shar is that she'll try to pull you down into that darkness to make you stay. End quote. Shar's followers worship her because she is said to make people forget their pain, erasing their bad memories. But what she really does is make them become used to the loss, treating it as a common and natural state of being. They are slowly turned cynical and hateful, distrusting anyone that promises kindness and goodness, believing that those are lies and that suffering is inevitable. Others worship her because they are blinded, nocturnal, or subterranean dwelling, because they hate light such as Goblinkin, or because they favor dark surroundings or must do business in the dark. She is worshipped by those grieving over a loss and wish to find peace or forget, and by those who have been mentally harmed and want to remember fully or be restored in their minds. Because Shar is the goddess of secrets and darkness, and because her worship is outlawed in most places, the Church of Shar is largely composed of underground cells, rather than an overt, uniform body of priests working from temples. Thus, they have a covert and widespread hierarchy organized around small congregations of worshippers. Two cells may operate in the same area and work together, but they work independently, so if one were to fail, the others can still flourish in its absence. Most members of the clergy would refer to each other with the simple terms brother knight or sister knight. To superiors, they would say mother knight and father knight. Their formal titles are so, from least to highest. Adept of the Night, the title given to novice priests and priestesses. Watcher, the lowest ranking order of the priesthood. Hand of Shar, an experienced priest that led Sharans in battle or on quest, or oversaw several cells. Dark Lady or Dark Lord, a senior priest that led a single cell. Night Seer, the overpriest for the faithful within a given realm or large geographical area. Flame of Darkness, an archpriest or direct servant of Shar. Specialty priests of Shar were called Night Cloaks. If you're wondering what a specialty priest is, it's a priest that focuses only on one deity. Basically, in 2nd edition, a cleric supported a cause or an entire pantheon, possibly even praising one member of the pantheon above the rest, but still serving the pantheon as a whole, whereas a specialty priest was a follower of only one specific deity. This distinction doesn't exist in 5th edition, and I don't really understand why it existed in the first place, but it did. Anyways, Shar specialty priests were called Night Cloaks. They used to be called Nightbringers and only existed outside the standard church hierarchy, serving as contacts, messengers, and enforcers of the Dark Lady's will. Then, in 1364 DR, they were made an official part of the church and changed their name to Night Cloaks. The faithful of Shar, referred to as Dark Followers, cannot share secrets with anyone not faithful to Shar, and should quench the light of the moon whenever they find it, and hide from it when they cannot prevail. Sharans are not supposed to hope, and are therefore forbidden to strive to better their lot in life or to plan ahead, except in matters directly overseen by the clergy of the Dark Goddess. Consorting with beings of good alignment is a sin, unless doing so to take advantage of them in purely business dealings, or to corrupt them from their beliefs into the service of Shar. Lower clergy must obey their superiors' orders in all matters unless it will lead to their own death. Lay worshippers must prove their faith by doing one dark deed ordered by a priest of Shar once every year, or bringing at least one being to believe in and worship the Dark Goddess. Above all, the dark should be a time to act, not to wait. Shar desires to bring all humans under her sway by promoting lawlessness and strife, so that more people will suffer loss and thus turn to her for peace, lessening the influence of all other faiths. Sharan clergy work to secretly bring down all governments and to publicize Shar's patronage of avengers so that the desperate and despairing humans of other faiths turn to her to get revenge, and not to the weak and demi-power of vengeance whore. To do this, it is common for Sharans to sponsor thieves' guilds, hedonistic clubs, and encourage political intrigue everywhere to further this assault on order. Since the Church of Shar is a very secretive organization, the only official holiday they celebrate is the Feast of the Moon. The Feast of the Moon is a holiday celebrated in most of the realms where people celebrate and honor ancestors and respected dead, telling stories about the deeds of their ancestors. The Church of Shar calls this day the Rising of the Dark. They gather under the cover of this mainstream holiday to witness a blood sacrifice and learn of any plots or aims the clergy want them to work toward during the winter ahead. The most important Sharan ritual is Nightfall, the coming of darkness. This is a ritual held every night, consisting of invocations, dancing, a charge or series of inspiring instructions from the goddess spoken by one of the clergy or by a raven-haired female lay worshipper, and a revel celebrated by eating, drinking, and dancing together. Lay worshippers must attend at least one nightfall and commit at least one small act of wickedness every 10 days. On nights of the new moon, nightfall is called the Coming of the Lady, and every congregation must carry out some significant act of vengeance or wickedness in the Dark Lady's name. In Baldur's Gate 3, you can come across the aftermath of a nightfall in Act 1. The most important ceremony of the priesthood of Shar is the Kiss of the Lady, also called a Kiss Moot. It is a night-long revel of slaying and other dark deeds that end with a huge feast at dawn. These kiss moots are scheduled irregularly by the priest of the Old Night. Which brings us to the major centers of worship for Shar. The oldest and probably the most powerful place of worship to Shar is the Temple of Old Night. It is a subterranean complex underlying most of the eastern section of Kalimport, the capital of Kalimshan. As of the late 14th century DR, it was ruled by the highest ranked known mortal servant of Shar, Urtamara, the dancer before dawn. Another temple of Shar is the Dark Embrace, which was founded during the early 14th century DR in by people who were dissatisfied with the leadership of Old Night. It is located atop a crag that overlooks the midpoint of the trade road linking Imniskar and Esmelteron. Its policies tend to be more ruthless than Old Night, and they are more openly active in local politics, employing assassinations where intimidation and the fulfillment of dark desires fail. There are rumors of a secret society known as the Dark Justiciars, which clergy of the faith are only given access to by killing a priest of Selûne. If you've played Baldur's Gate 3, you've probably heard this name before. This next part is a minor spoiler for Act 2 of Baldur's Gate 3, so if you care about that, I would skip ahead to the timestamp on the screen. In Act 2 of Baldur's Gate 3, you find something called the Gauntlet of Shar. It is an underground complex where initiates must undergo several trials, earning an umbral gem with each one. Once they have the required amount, they then must sacrifice a priest of Selûne to Shar, and then they become a Dark Justiciar. In terms of what set apart a Dark Justiciar from the regular members of her clergy, I'm not exactly sure. Other than their title and status, they seem to perform the same duties of enacting Shar's will. I suppose they were sort of treated as knights, a more elite soldier that was tasked with more responsibility and could sort of act independent of the hierarchy if they so wished, but they seem to just be powerful bodyguards. All I know is that they were especially proficient in illusion and phantasm magic, even more so than the other Sharn practitioners. Now let's talk about Shar herself. So in addition to the powers that all greater deities get, she has one thing that's unique to her. She can clearly perceive every being, object, and act performed within darkness. Shar had two avatars that she would manifest as, the Night Singer and the Dark Dancer. The Night Singer was a 12-foot tall female, masked in feathers of all sorts, that trail away into an increasingly intangible cowled cloak of gigantic proportions that merges into any shadows and darkness present. She sings continually, even when simply speaking, and her song is hauntingly beautiful and tragic. The Dark Dancer is a 7-foot tall, lithe, exquisitely beautiful human woman who dances gracefully and alluringly, her jet black body sparkling with stars, and her dark eyes two hypnotic orbs that can emit both harmful and beneficial gaze effects. In addition to her avatar, she frequently manifests to her followers as amorphous tendrils of darkness. She also works through dark tentacles, doom tyrants, which are undead beholders, and mysterious shadow monsters, using them as messengers, guards, and enforcers of her will. Now let's talk about her divine realm. So everything else I've mentioned in this video is the exact same in all editions of D&D. She hasn't really changed much. I mean, most of the gods don't. However, her divine realm has changed quite a bit, and it's led to a little bit of confusion as to where it currently is. So in 1st and 2nd edition, Shar's divine realm is the Palace of Loss, located in Niflheim, the 2nd layer of Hades. It is said to be a single tower rising above the gloomy gray of Niflheim, a tower without windows or doors. Few visitors can figure out how to gain entry or exit, but Shar's petitioners and proxies come and go as they please. The only ones confined to the palace are those who'd miss their freedom the most. That way, Shar can feel their pain more keenly. In 3rd edition, using the World Tree cosmology, the Palace of Loss was relocated to the Plane of Shadow, but other than that, everything stayed basically the same. In 4th edition, after the Spell Plague, the Palace of Loss was destroyed, leaving behind a gaping dark hole, much like an inverted tower, called the Foundation of Loss. She then made a new home called the Towers of Night. Now, because 4th edition didn't use the Great Wheel, but instead used the World Axis cosmology, Divine Realms didn't have an outer plane that they were home to, but instead floated in the Astral Sea, and they were called Astral Dominions. The Towers of Night were one of these astral dominions, and they had a portal that connected them to her old home, now called the Foundation of Loss. In 5th edition, we are not told where her divine realm is. See, most things in 5th edition, after the Second Sundering, were reverted to how they were in 2nd edition, since they went back to the Great Wheel cosmology. However, unless the Second Sundering rebuilt the Palace of Loss, that wouldn't really be possible. And even if that were the case, the question would remain of what happened to the Tower of Night. Most other astral dominions just went back to the location they originally were in the Great Wheel, but since the Tower of Night was created for 4th edition in the World Axis cosmology, it doesn't have a location in the Great Wheel since it was always an astral dominion. So where would this have been moved to in 5th edition? 5th edition likes to not give any detailed lore explanation, so we have no official stance on this right now, but if I had to guess, I'd say the Shadowfell. The Shadowfell is the creation of Shar, it is her domain, and the Tower of Night in 4th edition was connected to it. In 3rd edition, her domain was the Plane of Shadow, and in Baldur's Gate 3, Shadowheart refers to the Shadowfell as Shar's domain. So to me, it makes the most sense that the Towers of Night would have been moved to the Shadowfell. However, we have no official answer as to the location of her Divine Realm in 5th edition yet. I did ask the creator of the Forgotten Realms, Ed Greenwood, about this, and he said that things will be much clearer when the 5th edition Planescape book comes out. So it seems like the new book will be addressing this question directly, but we'll have to wait and see. So I was going to end the video here, but I feel like I can't have a comprehensive Shar video without mentioning the Shadow Weave. So what exactly is the Shadow Weave? Since Shar hates Mystra, because her earlier form Mistral attacked her and sided with Selûne in the early days of Realm Space, she decided to make her own weave separate from Mistra's weave. Most magic users use the weave to cast spells, and since Mystra is the weave, she can cut off or limit anybody using it. Shar wanted her own version of the weave that wasn't bound by Mistra's will for her own followers to use. The weave is a loose lattice work that runs through reality. The Shadow Weave is the negative space between this lattice. Just like Shar herself, it is based upon nothingness. Only worshippers of Shar, or those with explicit permission from Shar herself, can use the Shadow Weave. So what benefits does it give to those who use it? Enchantment, illusion, and necromancy spells were enhanced, while transmutation and evocation spells were diminished. The Shadow Weave was much better at creating darkness, but it was impossible to create light of any kind. Weave users had a much harder time detecting, dispelling, or countering magic cast with the Shadow Weave, while Shadow Weave users had a hard time detecting, dispelling, or countering magic cast with the Weave. The Shadow Weave was also not affected by disruptions in the Weave, and thus immune to wild magic or dead magic zones. Learning how to use the Shadow Weave caused you to lose a piece of your mind, lowering your wisdom score by 2. This could only be undone with the help of Shar. The Shadow Weave was created in 3rd edition and is really only talked about in that edition. In 4th edition, it gets a mention stating that when the Weave collapsed from Cyric killing Mystra, so did the Shadow Weave, but I have no idea what its state is currently in 5th edition. Now, in terms of 5th edition Cleric subclasses that would fit a Cleric of Shar, the player's handbook suggests the Death and Trickery domains, which I think out of all of the published subclasses, those ones make the most sense. In Baldur's Gate 3, Shadowheart, who's a Cleric of Shar, starts off as a Trickery domain Cleric, and I honestly think that fits really well. However, just for fun, I decided to homebrew a Cleric subclass that is specifically for Shar only, called the Night Cloak, and I'll put a link to that Google Doc in the description if you're interested in checking it out. But essentially, they can summon shadows, they can see in magical darkness, and eventually at 17th level, they become an expert in using the Shadow Weave. Anyways, that is the lore on the goddess Shar from the Forgotten Realms. Thank you for watching, and remember to subscribe to my channel if you want to see more D&D related content.